using 3 drum kits to make a larger-than-life sound, taking 4 different guitar lines to completely fill out the frequencies, mixing 2 vocalists with wildly different recording setups. All this and more on this episode of Mix with Meelz. So, Just Friends is essentially a song that I wrote when I heard Little Miss Perfect and Ordinary. So when I heard those songs, I heard the lyrics, and it was kind of setting up different versions of Lose and Amity. And I understand, like, these songs were not actually made for the Owl House, in case you didn't know that already. It was kind of branching off and playing with kind of what was already established in the canon. And so when I heard it, I was kind of hearing the first and second act of an Owl House musical with Luz and Amity as our main protagonists. And so I was just like, how can I make this so that it all builds up to this bittersweet climax of facing reality with Amity, you know, having a more cynical outlook on how she sees life, the high expectations that are placed on her, and Luz with a more optimistic outlook and how she kind of wants to embrace this new life, this new world that she's in. And so essentially my objective was to create something that was bittersweet, that basically came to some kind of conclusion, that basically brings essentially the story of Luz and Amity to a close if considered Little Miss Perfect and Ordinary. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk about the mix and production for Just Friends. Now, before we get started at all, this is a common practice that I personally like to do. So when I'm trying to figure out and I have like ideas for riff or lyrics in my head, or like how I want the song to sonically sound like, essentially I try to take a reference track, so at least I have kind of an idea of what I'm gunning for. In this case, I'm looking at Last Night on Earth from Green Day's album 21st Century Breakdown. Now sonically it's kind of similar, essentially tries to tell the story through the lyrics, and everything else is essentially trying to be dressing around it. And the main difference between that song and this song is that we're driving it with guitars on Just Friends, and Last Night on Earth is basically being driven by the main piano melody, and you've got the drums in the back for a little bit of the punk rock edge, even though it's a slow ballad. Now that we have that established, I want to go over some very basic things that you guys are going to need. First of all, you're going to need a DAW. So I personally use Reaper. If you're not into that, you can always try free trials. Pro Tools, free version, you can look at Ableton, you can look at Mixcraft, you can look at FL Studio still. Probably not for rock and roll like what I'm doing. On top of that, you're gonna need a whole bunch of plugins. Now what plugins are is essentially effects that clean up or give taste to different tracks on your song. This ranges from EQ to compression to reverb, which are coincidentally the 3 main things that I'm going to be looking at, probably the most important things in my opinion. Now Reaper has its own set of plugins, and even if you're using something else like Mixcraft or whatever, you can actually go to the Reaper website. I'll link everything that I talk about in the description below, and you can use those plugins essentially on any DAW that you want. You're going to want an audio interface. Now I know a lot of you there are probably singers or guitarists or something that you want to basically make music out of instruments that you have. You essentially want to have microphones that use XLR. There are a whole bunch of microphones that use USB, but for the purposes of this video, I'm mostly going to be talking about microphones that use XLR. Mostly because I use an audio interface which basically acts as my gateway for all the instruments that I use, all my guitars, my bass, if I want to record drums. And so we're going to go along with whatever other requirements that you're going to need along the way. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Okay, so we are going to go by one instrument at a time. We're going to look at drums first, we're going to look at bass, we're going to look at guitar, then we're going to look at vocals. So you can check out the timestamps if you want to fast forward to something at any given point. So let's start the song right off the bat. Okay, so talking about the drums, so there's a whole lot going on here. So these are all programmed drums through MIDI. They're using samples. It's not a real drum kit, but I try my hardest to make it sound as big as possible. At this point in time, I was using Addictive Drums. You can use that. It's kind of expensive compared to what I'm using now, which is Steven Slate Drums, which can actually get a free version of that with only one drum kit, but honestly, that's more than you will need to program drums. Drums are essentially programmed as MIDI. So this is how it looks like. You got the kick over here, snare, hi-hat, the crash, toms. So of course, this essentially, it does require knowing how to play drums at least a little bit. And if not, most of these programs usually come with their own loops and stuff, or you can always commission someone to come up with a drum line for your song. So first things first, I have 3 of these MIDIs. No, I did not program 3 times. This is the exact same one 3 times, and I will tell you why. You have the main kit. So the main kit is the main kit. So I have that basically being routed onto all these different tracks over here. So it's as if I was recording with a real drum kit. We'll go over those in a bit, but I will tell you why I have 3 lines first. This one, that is only a snare. And so what I'm trying to accomplish with that is one snare. These are actually 2 different snare sounds. One snare is basically being used as the top microphone. So when you are recording snare drums, typically what a lot of people like to do is have one microphone at the top and one microphone at the bottom. So one is going to be getting like the crack of the snare, and one is going to be getting the body. So the way I circumvent that is by having 2 different snare sounds, and I kind of blend them in as one sound altogether. You can blend that according to taste. And so that's why I do that. And for the third one, these are samples that I got called drum shots. And so these are essentially just the hardest sounds, the hardest, best drum sounds that I could find. Basically for all the hardest hits, for the kick, the snare, and the toms. And I limit them all so that they kind of stick together like glue. Maybe it distorts just a little bit. Essentially, I want for this not only to add extra reinforcement to the drum sounds I already have in the initial mix, but to kind of act as the pulse. So you kind of have the do-ta, do-ta, do-ta as the driving kind of force. Okay. And lastly, I have this weird little thingy, which was a trick I learned from Spectre Sound Studios, Glenn Fricker on his channel, where he was talking about parallel compression. Don't know if you can hear that very well. So the idea is I'm taking the sound of the kick, the snare, and the toms. Sometimes the toms, it depends on what song. I can't remember if I've routed it. Yep, so this one only takes the kick and the snare. So the idea is this is basically very heavily compressed and with a lot of reverb to kind of like give it a big airy feel. So this is essentially kind of the body of the whole kit. So let me show you what it sounds like without that. Okay, so just quickly go over, with drums, I like to hard compress them as much as I can. So compression, for those of you that don't actually know what it is, it's essentially louder sounds get loud, softer sounds get soft. Compression is basically there to kind of glue the loud and the soft together. Let's take all of that off. So if you can hear properly, a raw kick sound would be just a loud but, and like you don't really hear much of that right after. So it only registers for a fraction of a second. So what I'm trying to do here is we turn that on. We are trying to compress it so that the loud bit is kind of smushed and prolonged a little longer so that it kind of gives you a little more time to register that. A bit of reverb just for the atmosphere. So what I do here is I try to take out the mids because, so if we turn this to default, now my philosophy with EQing is really just search and destroy. But sometimes you just take a general rule of thumb, and it's also, you kind of build the intuition over time. See, there's a lot of low end over here. Want to keep a little bit of it. What is it that I do not want? It was the mid that I was talking about just now, so. There's a bit of a boxy sound over there. So this is a bit time consuming, but what you can always do with any track really is just take a little bit here. You go, which sound is the most annoying, which you think is not really belonging. So to my ears, that's what I don't like. Bring that down. And personally for me, especially with modern metal and stuff, like I like to have the clickiness of a kick pedal, so I like to bring up the highs just a little bit. Like hitting a hammer. Narrow that down a little. This is good practice as well. People can't really hear much underneath 20 hertz, so it's best to really just try roll off as much as you can get away with. Yes. So basically, essentially like that. That is my philosophy essentially for everything else that I've done with the drums. If we look at the snare, the way that I was blending it just now, I treat that as one sound. What I did over here, I put a tube amp over here. Basically, I'm trying to give it just a little bit of distortion, just to make it sound a little more aggressive. I want the harmonics from when it hits the limit. And so we have that. We take out the dynamics. Yeah. Those are the most important ones next to the overhead and the room. With the overhead, generally I don't do that much to it. I hard compress it just because I want to get the cymbals out there. So the whole point of the overhead is to have the cymbals. That's where the cymbal sounds comes from. You want to have maybe a little bit of some of the skins, the snare and the tom, to give the track a little bit more life. But the life of the kit comes more from the room. Yeah. Keep it kind of simple. In hindsight, I could have done a lot more. Those are the drums. Let's take a look at the bass. So the reason that I have two tracks over here is that they are two alternate takes. So I can kind of like play the pre-verse and then play the verse and then play the pre-chorus and kind of have them like overlap without like really weird cutting and janky stuff going on. So these have no effects on them. They are essentially going into this one track, which is the bass. And back in the day, I used to use an actual bass amp for my bass, but lately I've been getting into the habit of using amp sims on the bass because it's not so much that they've been getting good, it's just that with the bass there's only so much that you really need. So I'm using this called the TRC Bod, which is based on the SansAmp, one of the most popular preamps, hardware preamps. Have the drive all the way up. Everything else I kind of leave at noon, more or less. This is how it sounds raw. So essentially we're trying to get a bit of the boominess from the low end as well as the drive. We limit that to keep things very even because the bass is where we want the most evenness out of the entire song. Minus 6 dB. I'm getting away with a lot more, but for some reason I decided minus 6 dB over here. EQing over here, I want to take out the mids. And so one thing that you want to watch out for when you are mixing bass guitar is, let's once again reset this. You don't want too much of that. That will block up the low end and it's already being taken up by the kick. Eliminate that. Sometimes you want to bring out the highs just a little bit just to get the clickiness. Yeah, I play pick on the bass. Guitars. Now this is where the fun part starts. So, let's go section by section. The intro. So obviously those are two different guitars. For the clean guitars, I use my 2011 Fender Stratocaster. You know, you can't beat the cleans on this guy. I use this is my go-to for clean sounds on just about everything. And so for both of these, I'm using a plugin called Bias FX, which essentially it emulates guitar amps. And so, you know, the main way that people have been recording guitars has always been the guitar goes into an amplifier, which goes into a speaker, which is picked up by a microphone. This is essentially emulating the amplifier and the speaker and the microphone. So it was basically taken from one of the presets, and I moved it around just a little bit just to kind of keep the dynamics in check. It's the single coil from the Stratocaster, which I've been having a lot of problems with the dynamics, so I want to make sure everything is as even as possible. Using a Shure SM57, which is the standard for recording guitars, with the included speaker cabinet. Have the microphone around here. Things like this, it's kind of really up to taste, so it's really up to you to not only figure out what amp you want to use, what speaker cabinet you want to use, and what microphone you want to use. This applies to using bias effects. This applies to using whatever amp sim that you want, an Axe effects or Amplitude, or even using real amplifiers, like what amp you want to buy, what speakers you want to buy, and what microphone you want to use. Now this is where things get very complicated. So let's break this down one by one. First, let's talk about the rhythm guitars. Yes, there are four going on over here. So typically for rock and roll, you want to record like at least 2 for rhythm guitar to kind of fill out the space with the frequencies. This is how that sounds like. On its own, it's not bad. At this point in time, I was using bias effects. Nowadays, I use this puppy right here, the Line 6 Pod Go, and I can't recommend this enough. If you've got the bones to spare and you want some really good guitar sounds, I definitely recommend checking this out or checking out some other hardware solutions, because in my opinion, software hasn't really quite gotten there yet in terms of good usable sounds. I'll tell you why. So what I have here is Amped Roots. And Amped Roots is probably the best sounding metalcore, punk amp sim that I could find. This goes into the speaker cabinet simulation. So this is how that sounds like on its own. It's okay, but this is the reason why I record 4 instead of just 2. This is what the other one is. It's a lot more body, but it's a lot muddier. So what I do is I blend the 2 together. This is what that sounds like. So the way that I'm achieving these sounds is with one of them, I kind of have the high end of the speaker cabinet. And so basically how it works is if you're using a microphone, you point it closer to the center of the speaker and you get this sound. And for the other muddier sound, if you point it further away from the center of the speaker, you get this sound. So that's already 2 very different sounds right out of the gate. And so what I'm trying to do is blend them together to have a very full sound. You get the clarity and the punch from the boomy sound, but you kind of also have the high end to give it a little more air from the center of the speaker. And so there's that. I also have the guitar leads, which is 2 different lines on its own. So But first, let's take a look at this. So I recorded twice to kind of give it the room to fill out the gaps, and as well as I'd like to have it accompany the rhythm guitar as one giant entity that is spanning from your left speaker to your right speaker. So altogether, that should sound like. They are not hard panned to the left and the right. One is 50% left, one is 50% right. Then you have the middle one. Nothing too fancy here. It's more or less what I was doing with the rhythm guitar, except I add a bit of a delay. And lastly, after the lead, we have the acoustic guitars. These are the guitars that you hear throughout the entire song, verse and all. So for the acoustic guitars, I was using an AKG Perception 200, 220, I can't remember. It's not with me right now, my brother's using it. But I was using that alongside an acoustic guitar. I was using this, which is not actually mine, it's my sister's. I don't actually have my own acoustic guitar, unfortunately. So I was just playing that. I have the acoustic guitar somewhere around here, close-ish to the hole, but not really. The problem is, if you have it at the hole, you get a lot of the boomy resonant sounds. So let's hear what that sounds like without any of the EQ magic. You kind of hear a lot of the body and a lot of the boomy resonant sounds, and that's not exactly what I wanted to achieve. The reason that I have this here, while there's already so much distorted guitar going on over here, is that I essentially want to have the sound of the pick hitting the strings. That is really it. It's just meant to accompany that. So in terms of the actual notes, what you're supposed to be hearing is the distorted guitar. And the pick hitting the strings of the acoustic guitar, that's supposed to just accent the notes that are being played. And so when we go to the I see a girl walking by me, that is the clean guitar over here. Same principle as the others, but I put 2 tracks over here because I was cheating just a little bit. So let's hear what one sounds like. The other one is. Yeah, so it's supposed to sound like one guitar, but it's not. That's why I have 2 of these going into this one track, which is supposed to be 1 amp. So it's basically trying to treat these 2 tracks as one guitar. That's how I cheated over there. I do that a little later on with the straight hair, straight A, straightforward. If I were playing that live, I would just simplify that to that is an E major chord. It kind of just goes. I just kind of keep it at E major, and I kind of just like play with the strings. So I go. And that's about it with the guitars, I believe. Yeah, that's about it. We have the acoustic reverb, I see. which is essentially just the reverb of the acoustic guitar. I send that over here, and so this is how sends work. Sends are basically when you take the signal over here and you put it to an empty track over here. Let's see what the effects are. We just have the reverb, but we set it to 100%. So this is nothing but the wet sound. So this is absolutely nothing but the wet sound. That gives us a bit more freedom to kind of play around with it, to kind of fix it maybe as well with the EQ and compression and what have you. But over here, I just kept it simple. Just the reverb, had it down just a little bit. Kind of let the accents of the strings hitting, the pick hitting the strings last a little longer. And now to the part that I'm sure a lot of you guys are really excited to hear about. Koa and Melody Snowflake BA as Luz and Amity. So this part was very interesting. Both of them did exactly what I wanted in different ways. So Koa, if you are in the Brony community, Koa is a very established vocalist. She has done so many songs on Ponies at Dawn. So many features all over the place. I was very impressed by her work on Ponies at Dawn. Hit her up, and so what she did was essentially work on the vocals entirely on her own. She did her own tuning, she did her own fixing and everything. From the looks of it, compression, I didn't have to do all that much.
What's up inside of me? I can't make much sense of what I see. It feels so ironic.
Just a little minor touch-ups from me in terms of tuning and time alignment, just to keep things as tight as I possibly can. On the actual track for each take, I kind of have this de-esser just to take out some of the S's, like kind of sounds.
What's up inside of me? I can't make much sense of what I see.
And then without that.
What's up inside of me? I can't make much sense of what I see.
And so I kind of have everything going into this one bus for Luz. So first we have the EQ going into the compressor. Now this is probably not the most optimal way of doing things, but I take out the low end over here, a little bit of the mid. I want to bring up the highs just a little bit, just to give a bit more air to the sound. Compress it just to even out all the dynamics. This one is interesting. I use this plugin called JST Clip, which saturates the sound. So essentially it just kind of gives a bit more of the harmonics, a bit more of the distortion, to add a little bit of flavor. You'll see what I mean. Without that,
this what's up inside of me. I can't make much sense of what I see.
And with that,
this what's up inside of me. I can't make much sense of what I see.
So it's a little subtle on its own, but it kind of adds just like a little bit of punch to her voice. I have, just like I was talking about just now, she has her own reverb over here. I send it over here. I use this plugin called Valhalla Supermassive, which is kind of, the best way I can describe it is it's a mix of a delay and a reverb. It's hard to explain because it's not exactly either one of those things, but it's pretty good for free reverb. I EQ the reverb itself just to make sure nothing's really getting in the way of the actual vocals.
This what's up inside of me. I can't make much sense of what I see.
Without that.
This what's up inside of me. I can't make much sense of what I see.
The problem is that sometimes when you have the reverb, some artifacts and some unwanted frequencies kind of pass through. So this is just me trying to clean up what we don't want to hear and just like give us exactly what we want to hear out of the reverb, because sometimes so the computer will go, okay, well, Koa's voice has a little bit of the low end going on there, we're going to reverb that as well. This is us going, no, we don't want that low end, we just want to cut that out, just give us exactly what we want. The thing is, you can't do that on the original track too much, because you can't like suck out all the life. Sometimes you want to have a little bit of the low end, even though it's not necessary, just to keep some of the life in there to make it sound resemble a human being a little more. Yeah, so Koa knocked it out of the park with her takes. And so we have Amity played by Melody Snowflake VA. On the flip side, Melody Snowflake VA, she's still kind of learning her way through actually using DAWs and recording and everything, which is all the more why I kind of wanted to bring her onto this song, was because I just heard her voice and I'm like, this is not only does this fit Amity so well, but like she just has too good of a voice not to give her a little bit of exposure, give her a little bit of experience in working on a big original song like this. Maybe get her to learn a little bit of production along the way as well. So what she did for me was she recorded all of these different takes over here. We've got this take, we've got this take.
Are making me feel like the world's on my shoulders.
Got this take. Wait, she's got
making
this
me
take.
feel like the world's on my shoulders.
This take.
Are making me feel like the
So as an audio engineer, I am spoiled for choice, so I get to go, okay, I like the syllable over here, I don't like the syllable over here, this one's a bit off key, but this one is just right, so I get to cut and paste as much as I want, lay on the tuning as much as I want. The interesting thing is, she was using an iPhone microphone, yeah, so those things, turns out, aren't too shabby, actually. Of course, you know, you want to use an actual microphone, get an SM57, SM58 or something, or that's ideally what you want, but you know, you work within your means. If all you have is an iPhone microphone, you know what, you got a good voice, I'm going to work with you, I'm going to make sure you sound as great as you can. So once again, just sibilance over here. So what we're doing with Amity's voice is, so let's take this from the top, let's remove this right here because we don't really need that. So this right here is called reaffir. This takes out all the noise. So let's hear what that sounds like without this.
These high expectations are making me feel like the world's on my shoulders.
So being an iPhone microphone, you know, you're going to pick up a little bit of the noise, especially from the back and all that. Probably, I don't exactly know what the recording environment was like for her, but you could hear a little bit of the white noise in the background.
These high expectations are making...
It's a little subtle, but it's like, yeah, it's there. So we take out the noise, we bring up the highs just a little bit, and especially, you know, higher voice, higher register. We don't need the lows nearly as much as we need for Koa. So we take some of that out, compress it once again, add the dirt once again, and we just take out frequency that we don't entirely want over here.
These high expectations are making me feel like the world's on my shoulders. Little Miss Perfect, I've got no time for your games, though I hate I've grown colder. And
so once again, I've got her reverb, she has her own reverb. I'm gonna show you another trick that I did for when they come together. This is particularly for the last chorus when they are harmonizing together.
I wanna be free to be who I am, and not restricted by rules that say what I can be. I wish for...
So right off the bat, you kind of know that Luz is kind of leading the dance, so to speak. So she is kind of she's playing the main role, she's playing the main melody that's going on, whereas Amity is playing the harmony over here.
I wanna be free to be who I am, and not restricted by rules that say what I can be.
So if you mix them up together, it kind of does form like one thing. But I do want Koa's voice to stick out just a little more. Not for any reason other than I want to establish the main melody first and foremost.
I wanna be free to be who I am and not restricted by rules that say.
So the way that I accomplish this is, so what I'm doing here is I am routing Luz's voice over to Amity using rear comp the compressor. So every time Luz's voice goes up a little, I have Amity's voice ducked down just a touch.
Must come to an end, so it's for the best. We just stay friends.
Let's hear that together.
Must come to an end, so it's for the best. We just stay friends. No, I won't forget the time we spent, but it's for the best.
Without that.
Must come to an end, so it's for the best. We just stay friends. No, I must come to an end, so it's for.
You don't want to go overboard. Once again, this is a duet between the two of them, so Amity and Luz have to take the spotlight. But this is basically letting Luz lead the dance, so to speak.
Must come to an end, so it's for the best. We just stay friends. No, I won't forget the time we spent, but it's for the best. We just stay friends.
And so that is it. That is Just Friends. That's how I mixed it. That's how I produced it. Do you have any more questions? Leave some down in the comments if you want to know anything that I probably didn't go over just yet. Or maybe if you have any extra questions that I didn't address. Is there another song that you want me to cover? Please let me know. I know some people wanted to see how I did Welcome to the Sisterhood. Someone voted for Warriors. Someone voted for Sorry. I'm very surprised that people are liking Sorry, but I'm very happy about that. Once again, thank you all so much for enjoying Just Friends and streaming that, getting me to 1,000 subscribers. We're coming close to 2,000. Let's hit that in a couple of months, hey. And that was Mixing with Meelz. I will see you guys next time.